Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I'm your host, as always, Objectively Dan. This is the live call-in show. Happens every week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk about what people believe and why. And my guest joining me today, if I was in high school and I wanted to get my notes, I'd get my notes from Autumn, because Notes from Autumn is joining us today, or just Autumn for short. Autumn, welcome to Truth Wanted.
Thank you so much.
Yes, so Autumn, you are, I would describe you as an up-and-comer. Well, you've been doing it for, what, 6 months now? You've been doing the Atheist YouTube thing for a little bit now. And
not even, just since April, actually. So that's like 4 months?
In 2020, April was like 5 years ago, I think. So you're
fair.
A veteran
That's
at this
fair.
point, in my mind. But yeah, you started making some content earlier this year, and you have a degree in human development, and you use that degree of human development into your perspectives in your videos, which is kind of cool, right?
Correct. Yeah. Mostly using social psych and developmental psych, but I do talk about biological factors, social factors, all that stuff. So, and for people who don't know, human development is it encompasses biology, sociology, and psych. It's kind of like a combo.
Yeah, so always like to have lots of content creators on this show in particular. But what I found was kind of interesting was, we had talked outside the show, and you had told me that you've actually been an atheist for a couple of years now. I think like 4 years now, you said, but you just decided to make content earlier this year. Like, so why start making stuff now?
Dan, we all lost our jobs. I lost my job and I was collecting unemployment, and I got in a lucky situation where I got to go back and stay with my family for a little bit. So I didn't have to pay rent. So I was like, well, I'll just spend my time like I'm working for atheist activism, like I'm working for YouTube. And yeah, I've been doing it and loving it. It's been a really fun time.
Yeah, and that's cool. I'm glad that you decided to turn what's been broadly a negative for everybody to a positive, having more time to make videos. That's another perspective to look at this situation that we've been in for the past couple of months. So yeah, like your videos, like I said before, have a human development kind of focus on them. What's some of the stuff that you've talked about in your videos in particular?
So I've talked about the science behind, like, for instance, I did an angry atheist video, and I talked about what actually causes feelings of anger besides just, being an atheist and you're mad at God. It's like, well, let's look at exactly why those feelings and like aggressive behavior can occur, and and see if it actually is because of atheism or if it's because of other factors. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so what did you discover when you made that video?
Well, I didn't really discover anything. I basically talked about how aggression's a learned behavior.
Mm-hmm.
They've done a lot of studies on basically modeling aggressive behavior for children, or, all like in all sorts of settings. And it's like the more aggression you're exposed to, the more likely you are to mimic those behaviors. And basically, I just made the case for, if this is where like aggression comes from, and if frustration comes from having your goals blocked, these feelings, when you're seeing somebody who's maybe an atheist who happens to be angry in that moment, it's not that they're angry because of their atheism. It's like, let's look at the other factors as to why someone might be behaving a certain way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And like, it is a real phenomenon, this idea of like being the angry atheist. Like, it seems to happen where people go through these emotions like after they've recently deconverted. Like, I think a lot of people can attest to having that experience. So like if it's from a perspective of, well, maybe it's more about goals being blocked when this has happened. Like, can you expound on that a bit? Like, what's actually happening there when people go through like this angry atheist phase?
So, well, for the angry atheist phase, I mean, it could be for a myriad of reasons. You could maybe feel like you've been lied to, and so your frustration, if frustration comes from when your goals are blocked, then your goal would be to have people be honest with you, right? And when that need or that desire isn't being met, that turns into frustration. You're frustrated because you feel like people maybe deceived you, or you feel manipulated, and maybe you weren't, but it doesn't mean that you don't feel that way. That could be one example. But I mean, it's such a broad thing to talk about. There's such a broad spectrum of people with so many different experiences. It's like, I didn't happen to have an angry atheist phase. I feel like I kind of got lucky, because by the time I realized my atheism, I was ready to move on, and I was ready to do something positive, because I go, if this is the only life I have, I want to make it the best that I can. And so I feel like it was a matter of luck for me, but everybody's going to have a different experience with how they process their time of deconstruction, and maybe, what they went through.
Yeah, like I that's interesting that you say that not everybody goes through it, because I definitely went through that phase. I remember I was like browsing r/atheism every day. Like, I was just watching all the videos and stuff. And I'm not like typically, I wouldn't describe myself as like an angry person. So I guess I was just mad at this particular topic. I don't think it affected the rest of my demeanor, but whenever this topic came up, like, I just had nothing but negative things to say about it. And now that, of course, I've been talking about this for, about 2 years now, and just having conversations in general with it, I'm much more acceptant of the position that I'm in. But I think part of it stemmed from, yeah, like you said, like, I did feel like I was kind of being lied to. I guess I had this idea that I was going to be a Christian my whole life, do Christian things. I had goals for maybe working in a nonprofit, like a Christian nonprofit. And when I realized I can't really do that anymore, like, I kind of had this crisis of identity almost. It's like, well, I'm not a Christian anymore. So what am I? What am I doing? What's going on? And how come other people aren't thinking about the same things that I'm thinking about? So I can see how people can go through those phases. And for some people, I don't know if it ever stops as a phase, but I also see that, sometimes there is this stereotype in the atheist community that we're all angry all the time. And so people watching other content where people are angry, they might pick up on some of that too, especially if they were kind of feeling the fire from being burned out from their own religion. So yeah, it's good to talk about. And if anybody wants to talk about this stuff, by the way, this is a live call-in show. We are live on YouTube right now. We got a couple open lines, and we got some new call screeners tonight, one of which has a birthday today. So I want to give a quick shout out to Kurt, who is training to be a call screener tonight. Thanks, Kurt, for joining in, and happy birthday to you, bud. So yeah, going back to you though, Autumn, what is some of the stuff that you've been doing recently on your channel?
So recently, I took a risky move, and I delved into philosophy. I've been kind of doing a debate review between Christopher Hitchens and Dr. William Lane Craig at Biola University, and giving my thoughts on what I think now as an atheist, and what I can recall of how I used to think about these arguments as a Christian, and kind of comparing what I used to think to what I think now. And it's been pretty fun for me. I really like philosophy, even though I'm not like crazy good at philosophy. I don't know as much as like rationality rules or somebody like that, but it's been fun, and I've learned a lot from doing it. So,
well, here's the thing. We need more people talking about philosophy that don't look like me. And what I'm saying is, like, just white dudes on the internet just talking philosophy. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at the history of philosophy, it's lots of white dudes A lot of white dudes that are talking about stuff. And that's not to say that there aren't white dudes that have contributed to the history of philosophy. It's just, sometimes we don't often bring up that kind of work. And we kind of downplay it sometimes. So I'm glad that there's more people who don't look like me that are talking about that kind of stuff, because that's definitely super, super important. And I
to be fair,
go ahead.
Sorry. I was gonna say, to be fair, I am also cis and white. So if you're watching,
that's true,
and you happen to not be cis and white, and you have stuff to say on this, I encourage you to make a YouTube channel, make videos, and talk about this stuff, because we need more voices and we need more diversity.
Yeah, and a little birdie told me, that is, you were telling me the other day that you were actually planning on releasing a full video on your deconversion story pretty soon, right?
Yeah, that's probably still a few months out, because I'm still learning how to make videos. I'm still learning all the tech, and I want to do a really good job with that video, because I think the full story is going to be like a little bit deeper, and I just want it to be good, honestly. Just like I like to be creative, and I have like a certain vision for how I want to relay my story, and I want to make sure I do a really good job with it, and that I'm really proud of it, basically.
Yeah, because originally one of the things we had talked about was, I want to talk about your story and stuff, and you're like, wait, I want to make a whole video about it. So it's like, okay, I'll wait for you to do that, and we'll maybe we can talk about it again after it comes out. But yeah, really glad that you're here on the show tonight. I also hear that you have a second channel that you're working on too, right?
Yeah, we're just going to promote everything today. Yeah. The second channel's going to be a little more random. Like right now it looks super random. I've got like one psychology video and like 2 ukulele videos that I threw on there. And the channel's called Footnotes from Autumn. Little joke. Like, it's not the major stuff, but I plan on making some vegan videos, like talking about basically just vegan recipes or tips on how to go vegan, because I've been going through that recently, and it's been fun learning new stuff. I'm like such a nerd. I love to learn new stuff. And so since I've already gotten in the groove of making YouTube videos, I'm like, I'm going to make videos on everything now. So
yeah, it's fun. And good luck talking about veganism on the internet, because there's the thing. A lot of people, they don't like it when you talk about veganism on the internet. Don't know what it is. It's just a thing, especially around here sometimes. But anyway,
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I keep cutting. There's a little delay, so I keep cutting you off. I was going to say maybe I can create a plant-based safe space.
A plant-based safe space? Did you come up with that?
Yeah, I did.
I like that. I've never heard that before. That is awesome. A plant-based safe space. You need to copyright that. This is already going live. Somebody's going to steal it. Oh, man. Well, okay.
Don't steal it.
Don't steal it. But before we get to calls, we'll get to those in a second. I wanted to tell a story about something that happened at my work the other day. And so 2 of the guys at my work were starting to talk politics, and then they asked me a direct question about something. And I work at a place where most of the people are pretty conservative. So, I give my take on something, and somehow the conversation goes from politics to religion. And then from religion to like abortion specifically, which was really interesting. But anyway, they're talking about religion and stuff. And I decided to let the cat out of the bag. And I let one of my guys know. At this point, it's just me and another guy in this conversation. And I say, well, to tell you the truth, on Friday nights, I actually moonlight as like a host on, the show that's produced by the atheist community of Austin. So yeah, I'm actually an atheist, and I talk about this kind of stuff every week. And the guy said something to me that I don't know if this has happened to you, Autumn, or maybe people who are atheists who are watching this show. He said like, oh man, that's cool. Well, I don't judge you any differently for being an atheist, which sounds like a really like nice thing to say. But I've gotten that so much from people when I've told them that I'm an atheist. And here's the thing, like when I was a Christian, nobody ever said that to me when I told them that I was a Christian. So I don't know why people have to preemptively say this thing where it's like, oh, you're an atheist now. Well, I'm not going to think of you any differently. Like, isn't that just kind of implicitly rude? Like, imagine if I went up to somebody and said, "Oh, I'm a Muslim," and they said, "Oh, well, I'm not going to think of you any differently." Like, isn't that just like kind of condescending a little bit?
Yes. I mean, I get it. Like, hearing it that way, it's like, yeah, like, why do they say that to us? But at the same time, there is this expectation, especially you and I know because we grew up in the church. It's like some people really do have a hard time being accepted by friends and close family members when they come out of the atheist closet, so to say. Mm-hmm. And so I guess we're just so used to that line. We're in this culture, we're so used to that line of thinking that I never thought about how condescending that might sound, to someone who maybe doesn't know about all those narratives and doesn't know how common it is for people to be rejected for this sort of thing if they're in another culture. But yeah, it's really weird that we do that.
Well, the way I think about it is if somebody in my friend group said, "Oh, I'm gay," the first thing I'm going to say to is, "Oh, I'm not going to think of you any differently." I'm just going to say, "Cool. All right." Like, I just kind of accept it, But I don't know. For some reason, I feel like if you tell people you're an atheist, they have a need to, they feel they need to like defend themselves for a second. Like they have to justify why they believe, and I don't know. I get that sense sometimes when I talk to people. I don't know if that's just me. What do you think?
I'm sorry, repeat the question. My laptop was overheating and I got a little distracted.
I was just saying, I don't feel like, I feel like when people talk to me about this stuff, they feel like they have to justify their belief a little bit. Like they get a little bit defensive if I tell them that I'm an atheist, which is like, no, you don't have to defend yourself right then and there. Like I'm just expressing who I am.
Yes, it's because, they're confronted with maybe the fact that they might be wrong upon you saying, I'm an atheist. It could be that. I guess I don't want to say it's always one line of thinking, right? So it could be they feel like, oh, like there's people who don't believe in this or confronted with that. But it could also be those narratives that they hear, like we talked about, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a weird quirk of our culture, I think. I hope one day that's just not a thing people say, because as soon as you come out, like, it's not going to matter to anyone. But we're not there yet, especially where I'm at in Texas, even in Austin. I mean, it's just, you'd be surprised. A lot of people think Austin is like this liberal bastion, which, I mean, it is, but like, it's still Texas. That's what I try to tell people. It's like, you're still going to meet all kinds of people here, some, less accepting than others. But anyway, I want to get to some calls. But before I do that, I want to give a special thanks to the awesome people that support this particular program on Patreon. So we do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/truthwanted. And we're going to give an extra special thanks this week because, oh, look at that. Got a little fancy graphic for you guys. That's right. Each week, I'd like to thank a special patron of the week. And this week's patron is Sophie Oliver. So thank you, Sophie Oliver, for donating to Truth Wanted. I really appreciate it. And if you want to get a special shout out on Truth Wanted, please consider donating to the show. Again, patreon.com/Truth Wanted. I would really appreciate it if you guys would do that. But for now, let's take some calls. You ready, Autumn?
I am ready. Let's do this.
All right. So let's talk to Johnnie, calling in from Texas, calling in way before the show got started here. Johnnie, what's going on tonight?
Hey, man. How's it going?
Going pretty good. Johnnie, how about yourself?
Pretty good, man. Hey, I've been a fan of yours for a long time. I'm aware of the whole history with Magna Bosco, and I'm a big fan of SE.
Yep, same here. Same here.
But, yeah, man, I'm calling in today because I recently realized, had a conversation with a family member and realized how pitiful I was at actually sticking to the questioning part of the SE and not sort of imposing my direction on the conversation. So my tendency is to want to really explore the person's epistemology and then when they present a glaring issue with it, just kind of focus in on that.
Yeah.
And it always leads to them sort of feeling attacked, and they get their walls up and everything. So I was just kind of wondering what your take on that was with family members specifically, but just overall, to the questioning part of SE.
Yeah, Johnny. So I got to admit something. So like, I already scrubbed this from my Twitter, but the other night I follow people on Twitter that, I think most people at this point follow people on Twitter that they don't actually like. They just want to see what kind of BS they say, So I follow like this creationist museum, right? And I was just bored, and I was just in a mood. I responded to not only the tweet that they put out, but every single person that commented on that tweet. It was something about why the tweet was asking, why don't you believe evolution is true? Okay. And so all the people put in their things, and I commented on every single one, and I started getting into conversations, and buddy, I was not using SE like at all. I was doing the classic. I was like posting links to things that I know they're not going to read, and just like, putting out definitions of evolution that they weren't going to agree with. And I wasn't being effective in my communication at all. I was so embarrassed by it, I actually deleted all of it today. So you can't see any of those conversations that I had if you look at my Twitter, because like, I want to be a good representation of what like street epistemology can be. Right. So like, I'm not perfect, right? Like I do this thing every week, and I still mess up on occasion. Anthony, it may seem like he is like a super amazing perfect at it, but like he has tons of conversations that he doesn't upload to the channel. And especially if you look at some of his earlier stuff, he'll be the first one to admit, a lot of that stuff isn't very good, but you get to see that he like developed his method over time, just by like, when you talk to enough people and you hear the same amount of stuff, like, I don't know, for me, when I do the SE conversations, I just get into a Zen state. Like, that's how I describe it. I get into a flow state, and that's where, as long as I stay patient and I don't let things annoy me too much, I can focus on the method more than focusing on being defensive. And the one thing that helps keep me grounded with this too, Johnny, here's what I always think about is, I am not going to change this person's mind in this conversation. Now, that seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Because it's like, aren't we having this thing to change people's mind? No, we're planting seeds at best, because human beings do not change their minds entirely on their political stance, religious stance, whatever, through one Twitter conversation. All right. It has never happened in the history of people. Yeah. Have people been influenced by these conversations? Has it inspired them to look into other things? Sure. But like a whole 180-degree twist, it just doesn't happen. I mean, that's just not how people work. So like, slow and steady wins the race. You gotta be the good example when you're having these conversations with people, because part of having the conversation process is building trust with them and building that rapport. And if you can show that you can have a conversation with them without you exploding on them, then they might be willing to concede things to you or tell you things that they normally would not have, because they find that you're somebody that you can trust. So that's I guess the third point on this list I'm making here is, remember that you're building rapport at the same time when you're having these conversations. And so if it's family members, I mean, same thing, right? They may already know you, and they may already have those preconceptions and biases when coming into those conversations. And that's going to, hinder you in that process. But as long as you remember, you're sticking to the method, you're just having this conversation for the topic's sake, not because you want to make a point or you want to make an argument, because that's not what SE is, right? SE is just an examination of people's beliefs. And we hope through that reflection that maybe good change will come, maybe a closeness to this idea of truth, whatever that is. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point, sort of resigning yourself to the idea that the best you can hope for is to plant a seed, and don't hope for any more than that.
Yeah. It's, because you're not up, your job isn't to preach, your job isn't to debate. Your job is to just be a mirror in that conversation, if you choose to do the SE route, right? Which, of course, I recommend most people at least try it, But Autumn, did you have any thoughts on this?
I can definitely relate because I know that it is much easier to have these conversations with people who you aren't as close to. And once you're close to somebody and you're having these conversations, it can become more intense, even if you don't intend it to. And especially if it's just like bad timing, like it's late and people are tired or emotions run high because, I don't know, it could be all sorts of circumstances. So I can definitely relate to it. You guys use the word like mistake or like mess up when you were talking about how you start debating, but it's like you're using a method, street epistemology, that's your goal. But if you happen to pose an argument, that's not necessarily a mistake because it's like that could also be a seed. And while they might hold to their position strongly in the moment, eventually that argument might resonate with them when they have time to kind of cool off. So I wouldn't view it as a mistake. I wouldn't beat yourself up over it because it's like you guys are doing your best. You're trying at least you care. I feel like it's cooler these days to just not care about anything. Just, I'm not political. That's the trend is to not care. And I think it's like congratulate yourself for trying. That's what I think.
Yeah. And I want to add real quick to that too. I remember in my conversation with Anthony Magnabosco, I gave a definition of atheism that was totally whack. And then I think Anthony said something to the effect of, oh, I don't agree with that definition, or I think I might have a different definition. And I asked something like, oh, well, what would be your definition? And he was like, oh, actually, I kind of just want to talk about what you think. But just the thought of, hey, there's other things to atheism, like there's other definitions. Like I did not know that. Like that was not a concept to me. I thought atheism was this one thing. And so even though he didn't even do a deep dive on that, like that was introduced to me subtly through this thing that, again, that statement right there saying, oh, I might disagree with that definition. Like that's not street epistemology at all right there. Cause that's asserting your own view, but it still like affected me in some way. So yeah, I agree with Autumn, actually. That's a wonderful point. Like, it's not always about, like, messing up if you're not sticking to this method, because just having the conversation, as long as you're being patient and kind and people feel comfortable, like, that's a good thing. It's a good thing to have.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. I appreciate the advice, and I'll keep trying. I try and stick to a sort of stoic attitude of stay the course, and, over time, things will change. So yeah, I appreciate y'all's advice on that.
Heck yeah, Johnny. Well, thanks for calling in. Thanks for asking for our advice. I hope it was helpful to you because yeah, this thing is hard. Like I'll be the first to admit it. I am not always the best at it, but I have found more success using it than not. Because let me tell you something, those young Earth creationists I talked to yesterday on Twitter, they're still young Earth creationists. And, they might be for a while. I don't know. But we'll have to see. So, yeah, that's a fun conversation. We have some more callers here that I want to get to. The next one I want to talk to is, it looks like it's two people calling, Dan and Itto, calling from Arkansas. What's up?
Hello.
Do we got two people on this call?
Yeah. Itto, you there?
All right, maybe just one person on this call. Well, it's another Dan. So, hello, Dan. Nice to talk to you.
Hey, how's it going? Yeah. So I currently am in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Not the best place to be an atheist, but
True that. I've been to Fayetteville. Yeah. It's quite a place. Let me tell you, man. U of A, right? University of Arkansas. Oh my goodness, I've never seen so many frat buildings in my life. It is just party city over there.
Yeah. Today I was working and I had to tell a lady that I would pray for her, and it was pretty sickening, actually.
Whoa, wait. Oh, wait. I know you're calling about something else, but why did you have to pray for her?
I'm currently working a census job, and she was pretty broken up about losing her husband, and but yeah, she I can't say too much about it because
I gotcha.
I Yeah.
Gotcha. But that's interesting.
Long story short,
I've never heard of an atheist being put in a position like, well, I mean, obviously sometimes we're asked to like be in a group prayer or something, but to be asked specifically to pray for somebody, that's kind of funny.
Yeah. And, you know, we are trying to like build a network out here. The other person I had on the line was actually someone that I became friends with after you posted a link to her channel, actually, from this show.
Yes. And so just to kind of give a background information of you, I actually knew that at least one of you guys was going to call in this week because a few weeks ago, we had an awesome caller that told us about the intersection between atheism and disabilities. And I was like, wow, that sounds really awesome. Like, let's get a link to your channel out here. And there was kind of a follow-up after that. So maybe you can go ahead and explain what that follow-up is, Dan.
Oh, yeah. This is a person who they're working on activism for people with disabilities who are atheists. Because, I mean, this is a group that is pretty, like, heavily exploited. Yeah, to say the least. And sorry, I'm pretty nervous.
You're all good.
Yeah.
We're all friends here. Nothing to be nervous about.
Yeah.
So yeah, from what I recall from the email, somebody was doing some more work within this community and stuff, and you guys just kind of wanted to share some like updates on what had happened since the last time that we called, right? Or that you guys called.
Yeah. I just got some outreach from this person. From her name's Itto. She called probably like 3-4 weeks ago, and yeah, she's just, she got her YouTube channel growing, and she's just really trying to push for activism here. And yeah.
So I guess because I guess Itto isn't on the call, but maybe you could explain again for people who like aren't familiar with this, like what is the intersection with atheism in the disabilities community? Why would somebody be interested in talking about those things?
Well, for myself particularly, I have like mental health things. I'm bipolar, so it's kind of a different perspective to where I've been sort of exploited by people for a need to be like kind of impulsive. Like once I became a Mormon, actually, when I first moved out here to Arkansas, and that's a pretty interesting story. But that lasted about 2 months, and let's see, after that happened, after I converted to Mormonism, to which I never really was a sincere Mormon, but I tried to believe. And after I actually was baptized, they pretty much had moved on to, who knows, like the next person after that. So, but yeah, as far as her experience as a blind person who is an asylee, I think that she's in a demographic that definitely gets approached by people. I mean, I can't say too much for her, on behalf of her. But,
sure.
So yeah, this is her demographic. She's more obviously externally disabled than I am, and so yeah, that's kind of what she's doing. I personally just found the channel, and hey, turned out to be in the same area. So
yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, you guys have met up since then after watching the channel. After we plugged it on the show and stuff, which is really cool. I'm really glad that you guys have made that connection. But yeah, like to your point, and I want to say this, like I think people don't realize just the narratives that go on in some Christian communities about disabilities, because it is kind of more on the fringe side for the most part, but like it's very insidious, I think. Like one, there's this idea that your disabilities are like because there's some sort of character flaw, like literally because you sinned. Like that sounds really old fashioned, but like that still exists. And that's still a thing that like millions of people believe, whether inside or outside the United States, right? Like, oh, you had this bad thing happen to you. You're blind, you're deaf, you're whatever, because your soul is somehow impure or you've committed some sort of sin. Maybe if you're in, another type of faith, it's because of something you did in a previous life. Like these are legitimate things that people believe. And not only that, but use it to create a hierarchy of discrimination. Because the idea is, oh, well, you have this thing because there's something wrong with you. Therefore, I can judge you in a certain way because of it, right? Another thing that happens that you see too is like these people who will straight up go up and try to pray for you because they see you're in a wheelchair or, you have some sort of aid or something. And like, I don't know what goes through those people's minds. I don't know if they think it's just by laying hands on you that you just might be healed right then and there. But it is kind of presumptuous and also just unwarranted. It's like, I would not want people just randomly touching me off the street, and praying over me. But I've heard stories of that from people that I've known who have wheelchairs or who have these disabilities, and it's awful. And it's also like, it's dehumanizing in some way, I think.
And I was in a depressive stage once, and I had some Mormon elders once, lay hands on me to try and, help me with that. And, obviously, I mean, nothing happened, and it felt weird. Like the entire time I was like, this is not doing anything.
Yeah. Let's be honest, like nothing happens from that. And the worst thing too, is when you have a mental illness, that gets even worse sometimes, because sometimes people will say that's because you got like demons in you or something, or, it's because you're living a life of sin. Like, again, it goes back to this idea of like, this is your fault somehow. Because, why would a just and loving God just randomly distribute disabilities amongst a human population? Like it kind of doesn't work in that sense, but it does make sense if you deserved it somehow. But I mean, that's just not how, we view the world, right? There's no, one divine entity kind of doling out these difficulties people have to deal with. It's just the way it is sometimes, and we learn to love and live and grow together as a community, or we can just pretend and believe in these silly power dynamics that are happening. It's awful. And the worst is when they tell you not to take your medication either, because you need
in there.
I know people from Waco who have been told that from church elders, and that's just really scary to me. Really, really scary. Please take your medication that's prescribed to you from your doctor, and do what you got to do if that's your case. But I
actually had some experience in like 12-step groups, and the guy that was sponsoring me told me to get off my medication, and I later learned that this is a real problem in these groups, and they actually printed a pamphlet encouraging people not to play doctor because there's really bad things like people killing themselves. And it's as soon as I found that out, I was just disgusted, and I was I don't want anything to do with these people anymore.
Oh yeah, and now you're seeing the anti-vax community do the same thing of just not trusting medical experts. They tend to run in the same circles as some of these other things that we're talking about. So yeah, it's all kind of this Venn diagram of awfulness. But I'm glad you found your way out, Dan. I'm glad that you're here talking to us on this show. I really appreciate it. I want to know audibly if you had any stories about, kind of the stuff that we're talking about here that's related.
Yes. I can speak more to the, sorry.
Go ahead, Otto. Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, no. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry. I more can speak to the mental health aspects of the conversation because, first of all, personally, I went through a long time of having cycles of depression and anxiety. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder in early adulthood, about 18. And, I believed those things about myself. I believed that I was being oppressed by demons, and I was reluctant to get professional medical help And I would kind of tend towards going to the church for help because I just thought I needed to pray more. I needed to rely on God more. And it wasn't until I actually saw a licensed psychologist. So just so everybody knows, not everybody who's a therapist or a counselor is a licensed psychologist. And there's different modes of psychology, different modes of talk therapy. So if you're thinking about going to therapy, do a lot of research and, don't trust that everybody is who they say they are. Make sure that it's somebody who's credentialed for the sort of thing that you need help with and who specializes in the kind of condition that you need help with, because it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. And if therapy doesn't work with you with one type of therapist, I urge you to continue trying different modes of therapy, different therapists, because I would hate for somebody to see a therapist, try it, and think it's just not working and give up, because I think that there really is help out there. There's so much research being done. We're getting so much better at this stuff in the information age. And, I'm really sorry for the people who believe those things about themselves that maybe they're bad or there's something wrong with them, because really it's just like it's not just like breaking your leg, but I mean, as an analogy, if you were to break your leg, no one would say that you should have tried to be less clumsy and, that you should pray. They would tell you that you should, go to the doctor and get help. And
they shouldn't say that, but
your brain, how much more?
Yeah. I was just going to say, there's definitely people that would say that, but yeah, you're totally right. They shouldn't say that.
Yes. Well, I would say it's a lot more common that someone would say that you would get help for your leg,
Yeah.
It's an extreme minority who would say you shouldn't even go to the doctor for your leg. But you're right. I don't want to overgeneralize there.
If anything, I think it's a little more insidious that a lot of religious people are now embracing that you can have these mental illnesses and stuff like that, because it gives them more credibility. I almost think it's better if they were to just be out with it like they were before, to be honest.
That's an interesting take. I don't know. I'm glad that we're slowly living in a culture where people are being more honest about their mental illness. I think that's true. But I also see that the people who are being more honest about their mental illness are people who are generally more vulnerable in society. And so the ones who, I don't know, who are kind of stronger, especially on the Christian right, who are kind of in denial about a lot of this stuff, they're not going to be the first ones to admit it, even though those are the communities that should be the first ones to admit it, because that's where you see a lot of these dysfunctions and problems happening, right? So yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I'm glad that you called into the show, and I'm glad that you're able to tell that story about you guys meeting after, the episode of Truth Wanted aired. That's really cool. Sorry we couldn't get her on the phone tonight, but thanks again, Dan, for you calling me, and hope to hear from you guys soon. So thanks.
All right. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, and one more thing on that too, if you are interested in seeing a therapist for whatever problems you have, just try to keep in mind too, that just like what we were talking about with street epistemology, you're not going to be able to solve all the things you want to solve with one session. That's something you typically have to work at. Because I've been there. I've seen them once or twice, and it's always at first it's what was the point of that? But especially now where we have to be more careful about our mental health than ever. If you feel like you need help, go seek it, go do it. But don't call me. I'm not a licensed professional. I'm just a call show host. So, definitely find somebody who can handle that stuff. But until then, let's go ahead and talk to our next caller here. We have Michael calling in from Colorado. Michael, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hey, Dan. Hey, Autumn. Thanks for taking my call.
Absolutely. How could we help you today?
So I was curious. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on the Christ myth theory with reference to Jesus' existence. I know it can be kind of a controversial topic, so I was curious to what you guys thought.
Yeah, Jesus mythicism. I'll answer on this first, and then I'll let Autumn talk about this because I have an interesting history with it. I actually met Richard Carrier about 2 years ago. Yeah, I did. I had lunch with him. I was in Columbus, Ohio, at the Secular Student Alliance conference, and I was like, "Hey, I know Richard Carrier is at Columbus. I wonder if he'd be down." And he was, and I got lunch with him and some other people, and I was kind of fascinated. You know, like I had read his book. Well, he has a couple different books. He has one about morality and one about why he's not a Christian, but he also has some stuff about, Christian mythicism and stuff. And, I will say that most people don't understand the mythicist arguments to my satisfaction. I would say I do think that there's some mischaracterization there. So I would be more, I think there's more credibility to it than most people give it, but I'm still not 100% convinced. And the only reason why is because there's still a lot of questions I have about the formation and the process that I don't know. Maybe Carrier could answer for me, and maybe some other people could, but I just haven't dived deep into that conversation. And it's such a touchy subject, especially even among atheists. I definitely wouldn't talk about it with a Christian because they'll just point to the fact that most scholars do agree that Jesus exists. And I'll go ahead and take the mainstream scholarly opinion on it for now because I'm not a scholar myself. But I will say it is interesting, and it is, I think, worth looking into if you're like, hey, trying to figure out the answers to stuff. But yeah, if I had to debate, like, I don't know, Godless Engineer or something on it, I don't know, that would be a different story. Because I'm interested, but I'm not convinced. I'll leave it at that. So Autumn, what's your take on Jesus mythicism?
So, to be quite honest with you, I just learned about this concept that, some people think that historical Jesus might not have been a real person. And I was having a conversation with another atheist activist about this, do I think that Jesus was a real person? And I guess my answer has always been based off of that the experts say that he was a real person. Everybody in the culture, especially Christian culture, it's like all the historians, all the scholars say that Jesus actually existed. And even atheists will admit that Jesus was a real person. I've heard that so much. But I actually haven't looked at the evidence for myself. So maybe this is a good video idea for my channel. I could, see if I'm a Jesus mythicist, if I want to look at the extra biblical evidence for the existence of Christ and come to my own conclusions, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting, like, because there are some weird things about Jesus that we don't see about other, like, what we would consider real people, right? Like Jesus never wrote anything himself. Well, everything that we know about him is written by other people, and the stuff that we do have about him is a couple decades after the fact, after the events that were described. And there is like some similarities between other things that we would describe as myth to the stories that we have about Jesus. I mean, I'm certainly certain that the Gospels as described, or Jesus as described in the Gospels, rather, like most of that can't be true, just because miracles and stuff, right? But to say that he didn't exist entirely like that, I don't know, and I don't know if it's something we'll ever know completely, but I do think it's at least worth investigating, because why not be open-minded and try to figure out, people say they're sure he existed. Why? It's good to kind of figure out those answers. But Michael, I'm sure you have a take on this, huh?
I do. I'd consider myself a pretty hardcore mythicist.
Okay.
I really was surprised.
Wow.
It's really cool you got to meet Dr. Carrier. I've read a lot of his books. I also like Robert Price, if you know about him.
Yes.
I'm a fan of both of them. And I actually have been thinking about starting my own YouTube channel to discuss this topic in depth, because I'm pretty passionate about it. And I'd like to. I don't really think it gets brought up. Godless Engineer does some stuff. I don't really think it's very commonly discussed.
Yeah. Another guy that I'm sure you're familiar with, David Fitzgerald. I've emailed him about this too. I've never met him in person. I think he's in California, but I had some questions and I asked him about it because I was interested in this topic like a couple of years ago. I haven't looked at it in a long time, so I'm not up to snuff. But hey, if you're making content about it, I'd be interested in knowing what the arguments are there, because I don't think it's set in stone like most people say. I think there's room to kind of look at it. But yeah, good for you for like putting your stuff out there. Let's see if it gets like totally taken down by the rest of the atheist community, though. It's not a very popular position, and you already know that. But yeah.
Oh yeah. David Fitzgerald is pretty good. It's too bad he doesn't really do many debates though. He's got like 2 debates online. I heard him say he kind of hates doing them. So, but he seems to be pretty interesting. I've read some of his stuff too.
Yeah, I read the first part of like Mything in Action, I believe is his book. But he's got like 4 different parts, like series in that. Like it's like 4 different books, I think. But like I did not go through them. It's sitting in my Kindle, but it's not there. Well, cool, Michael. We answered your question. You got our takes on mythicism, so there you go. Hopefully that's everything you wanted to know.
No, I have a question though.
Oh, Autumn's got a question.
I have a question.
Cool.
I have a question for Michael. Is that fine?
Yeah, totally.
Is that cool with you? Yeah.
Sorry,
there's a delay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have your best convincing arguments ready to go as to why you think that he didn't really exist? Like, I would like to have my mind blown.
I mean, I've got a little bit of a spiel I might be able to give you. I would guess I would start with the fact that pretty much everything that you've got in the Gospels, at least in my opinion, you can pretty much take any story and you can establish it is not history, what you're seeing there. I mean, Dan talked about the miracles. I think you can go way farther. With any other person in history, you can establish ordinary, mundane facts about them, like where they were born, what their family was like, what they did. You can't do that with Jesus, at least in my opinion. There's something Robert Price calls the law of biographical analogy, which is a principle used in history, basically that you have heroes and their stories get embellished in similar ways, and these embellishments are normally legendary. So you don't necessarily have to prove that Jesus borrowed from other heroes, just to say that there are other heroes like Hercules, Zeus, Apollonius, Romulus, and they all go through these very similar, changes over time, similar stories. And I mean, very few people would say Romulus existed or that Hercules did. And so I guess I would just say the things that people try to say about him that are true, or they say are true, they're just, I think they're evidently not the case. And then the second thing I'd say is that the origin and development of Christian thought, of Christology, about people thought about the person of Christ, I would argue, like Richard Carrier does, that his origins are entirely mythological. I do not think original Christians thought of Christ as a physical human being, earthbound. I think they thought of him as someone who is like a Superman deity in the clouds. If you look at religious cosmology of the time, they had a very interesting view of the universe and what it included. You got the different concentric spheres that David Fitzgerald talks about. If you read the book of Hebrews, chapter 9 specifically, I think gets into that a little bit. And so, you take all of this into consideration. And I don't think you can say anything about a person in history who people agree that existed outside of Jesus. You couldn't lay a finger to them. Even Alexander the Great, Caesar Augustus, whoever you want to talk about, you could not say these things about them with any form of certainty. And so it just seems like Jesus, you can call it special pleading. I think it's justified. I think there's very good evidence to say there's just too many things stacking up against him. I don't think he existed.
Yeah, the one thing I add to that is, again, it's like we don't have any contemporary people's writings of Jesus, like, and people point to Paul, but like Paul saw a vision of Jesus. He didn't actually meet the guy. Yeah. And we're just talking about other people's stories. And of course, if you understand what modern scholarship says about the Gospels, in that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were not, the authors of these works, that these were written by later people. So that's why I say, it's definitely not 100% fact that Jesus had to be a real person for me. But I if I went even farther than that, I might, people might roast me on Twitter or something. I don't know. But I will stand by saying I am not presently a mythicist. I'm just saying, like you're saying, Michael, I think I don't think people know the arguments as well. And I think if people evaluated them more, then maybe, the conversation would be there. But I think there's often some mischaracterizations that happen when we have this discussion. And, we can't just say, oh, all scholars think this, therefore must be true. Like that's not how the world works. How many things have scholars thought were completely true at one period of time that were the absolute opposite of true? Like later, it's happened tons of times in history. I wouldn't be surprised if this would be another example of that. But again, I can't say with certainty either way. So, Michael, that's all the time I got for this call. But thanks for calling in and talking to us. I do appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your night. So there you go. I talked about Jesus mythicism, but I'm not a mythicist. Don't get it twisted, because I already know people are going to say stuff. Anyway. What is that? How many conversations have you had about Jesus mythicism, Autumn?
Literally just one before this. I just had a conversation the other day about this. I hope Michael's still watching, because I'd like him to jump on Discord after the show, because now I have 20 more questions for him, and that might inspire some content for the channel he wants to make. So
yeah, there you go. It's I think it's worth talking about. I think it's worth having a discussion. But yeah, it's not my bag at the moment. I'd have to look into all the stuff again to really go through point by point what I think about it, because it's complicated. But we don't have time for that. We got to get to our next caller here. Next, we're going to talk to Jake, who's calling in from Washington. Jake, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Dan, huge fan. And I recognize Autumn, but I'm not sure from where.
Well, Autumn was on Shannon Q's channel the other day, so maybe you saw her there. That was your first live stream, I think. So, yeah, I don't know other collaborations you've done.
I've done a collab with Taylor, but that was on the Anti-Bot, but that was on my channel. But
right,
it could be from my YouTube channel.
I don't know. But Jake, what do you want to talk to us about?
Yeah, I have some friends that actually you're familiar with some of them that tell me that the street epistemology is a dishonest conversation technique designed to make somebody lose faith or question their own belief in epistemology, and it follows a specific script to lead them directly to atheism. And I definitely wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't continue the conversation and then ask somebody who's more familiar with it than myself.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Do you think there's any kind of dishonest manipulation going on there?
Well, the answer to this question is a bit more complicated than one might think, because if we're talking about the person who put the label of street epistemology on this method, that being the guy named Peter Boghossian, was it his intention to use this to make atheists? Yeah, I think so. I think that's kind of clear from his book, A Manual for Creating Atheists. Now, he didn't like that title of the book. There's kind of a story as why it's called that. But I think maybe there are people out there who could use it for that ends. But the purpose of, really what street epistemology is a modified Socratic method. So in that sense, the method itself is neutral. You can use the method on any belief. It's not just a Christian belief. You can use it. If I were to say, yeah, I believe for certain that there are no gods, you can use street epistemology on that statement, on me making that statement right there. The fact is, most people who are interested and who are using street epistemology are atheists. That's just the fact of the community. And so it can easily be seen under this perception that, yeah, this is a tool for atheists to make other atheists. But I think what's more accurate is to say that this is a tool for people to examine their beliefs. And it just so happens that a God belief is one of the most popular beliefs in this country. And it's a belief worth examining, in our opinion. I think any belief is worth examining. I'm not sure if there's a belief that isn't worth examining. And if you go to bigger street epistemology folks than me, folks like Anthony Magnabosco, if you look at their channel, they talk about God beliefs, but they talk about all kinds of other stuff. They talk about beliefs in ghosts, beliefs in whether the president is good or not, whether there's aliens, whether or not there's karma. I mean, like, there's all kinds of stuff that people are using this method for besides just a God belief. So is it designed to inspire doubt? Well, I think it's designed to inspire people to think about why they believe what they believe. Because if we're believing for reasons that may not be good, most people would want to know that. But we can't always figure that out for themselves. Sometimes it takes an outside influence. Personally, again, I was a Christian when I first talked to Anthony. I was grateful for that conversation, even as a Christian. And you can tell from that video, and you can tell from other Christians who've talked to Anthony. Most of them are pretty happy with it. They like it. They enjoy having it. If they didn't, you wouldn't see the smiles that they have at the end of their conversations. And if anybody isn't comfortable with it, then Anthony doesn't put it up on the channel. He respects people and doesn't put it out there. But yeah, like it's designed with consent in mind. And it's also designed just, again, to be neutral. But that perception, it's easy to see why it exists. So there you go. There's my comprehensive answer, Jake. I hope that was good for you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That some of that isn't too far from what I was asking about them, because like I was saying, it is possible to use it in a manipulative way, but it's also possible to use it in an honest way. If you're asking honest questions with the honest goal of understanding, then it's not manipulative. But their response was that it's been used to directly hurt a lot of people in their community, and when we talk about like the way Anthony Magnabosco uses it, it is people cannot properly consent to the conversation because of the way that he approaches or allows people to approach them. What they were saying is, if Anthony were to say set up a booth and say, this is my goal, come to me if you want to talk to me, that would be one thing. But with the way that he does it, that inherently leads to an inability to properly consent, especially because people don't understand what the technique is or the script that people tend to follow. Not that you or Anthony necessarily follows a script, but a lot of people do follow a script.
So I have a few thoughts on this, because I think street epistemology is supposed to be iterative. I don't know that we have ever, if there is a script, because every question you ask has to be context dependent on the answer, and someone's confidence on that answer. Like, I guess, if somebody said, yeah, I'm like 60%, or from a scale of 1 to 100, I'm like on a 60 that something's true. I would ask, okay, well, what would bring it to a 70, or what would bring it to a 50? That's something that you can ask every time. That's kind of like a script, but it's so context dependent. I'm not sure what people mean when they say it's like a script. And I do understand this idea also that, you don't really know sometimes what you're getting into with these conversations, but that's learning. That's learning about yourself and learning the limits of your knowledge and what you know about things. And that's just going to happen regardless. If you ever have a conversation about your belief, and especially if you have someone who's so confident about their belief being true, but if they discover through their own reasoning that the beliefs that they have, may not have been built up by the best reasons, then to me, it's almost like, what more humane thing to do than to let people know of that, but I can understand if you disagree with, the core principles of who the person is that's doing the SE, it can kind of seem manipulative. There are people, and I said earlier that there's not a lot of religious people that do SE. I have seen people on YouTube that have tried to do it. I know at least one Christian guy who did it, but it wasn't even real SE. It was more like him trying to ask Pascal's wager. And I also add that if you're making arguments through SE, you're not doing SE. And I think that's a thing that trips people up too. If you're trying to lead people to a specific conclusion, then you're not using the method correctly. It's supposed to be just an evaluation. I shouldn't be trying to convince you that you should be an atheist through doing SE. That's if I was doing that, then it stops being SE, then and it becomes something else. It becomes, I don't know, lawyering, I guess. Like, because you're not supposed to lead people to certain kinds of predisposed conclusions. Again, it's supposed to just be a reflection. You're supposed to be a mirror. But yeah, I can see somebody can use parts of that method for their ends. That's true.
Yeah, that's kind of how I've seen SE in the past. Is we want to try and examine why you believe the thing that you believe, and it doesn't matter anything that you're ready to examine. Let's just understand how you come to that point. And the thing is, this particular community, and I don't want to call them out, but this particular community is telling me, hey, you know what? That may have been the goal of some people, or of the method, but how it's used. Like you can say, okay, you know, there's this Christian and there's this atheist and there's this person. They had a good experience. But if you ask these people in this community, they're telling me, no. This has been used to hurt this person and this person and this person. Tons of people in this community have been directly hurt by how it's used and how it's been used to manipulate them or their people directly connected to them.
You know, Jake, I've been in the SE community for a couple of years now, and I'll be honest, this is the first time I've ever heard of anybody saying they've been directly hurt by it. If that's true, I'd certainly like to know, but I've simply just never heard that before. I've heard people accuse Yeah, go ahead.
They actually said one of the people said they had this conversation with you previously.
About hurting people?
People being hurt by it or manipulated by it.
I don't know. I mean, I again, like, you can use parts of this method to hurt people. Like, yeah, you can ask leading questions, but like, again, leading questions isn't really what the kind of questions we're trying to ask. If you're just asking somebody why they believe something, or is the reason why they believe a good reason, you know, like, anybody can ask that. That's not really SE specific. It's just, but it is within, you know, that's also an SE type of question, if that makes sense. I was going to say also that I know that, you know, people have accused SE of trying to lead people to like a scientific verificationism, you know, that there's only one specific way that we can verify our beliefs. But again, that's just not what SE is. We're trying to figure out, how do you figure out your beliefs are true? What method are you using? And do you think it's a good one? But, you know, why or why not? And I don't know. I don't know of anybody. Sir, I don't know of anybody that's come to me and said, Dan, I've been hurt by SE. I don't know if I've had that conversation.
Yeah. I don't want to mention them on air. But yeah, it's definitely, this is why I want to understand from the other side of the other point of view, because if somebody's telling me, hey, this is being used to hurt people, is it because people in the community are manipulating the way SE is used, or do they have a warped view of SE, or this kind of thing? And it the way you're explaining it is definitely a different side of the coin from the way they explain it.
Yeah. And I can't speak to, you know, other people's experiences without, you know, having that conversation with them. Cause again, I don't know. I'm hearing this from you, and you know, if somebody wants to call in and tell me like, hey, this is how SE has hurt me, or this is how I think SE can be manipulative, I'm certainly open to that conversation. And if it's something that, if SE ends up hurting people more than it helps, I'll find another method. But you know, speaking to my own experience, it's certainly been helpful for me. And I know a lot of people where it's been helpful for. In fact, some of the people just call it in saying how helpful it is for them. So I don't know. But yeah.
You know how gaslighting is like telling somebody something that, like when you have a conversation and you tell the person in the conversation that what happened isn't actually what happened, and you get them to doubt what actually happened. And they use that as an analogy for how it is used to get people to doubt their own self.
Yeah, here's the difference I'd say to that, though, and Autumn could probably speak to this too, because this gaslighting is a topic that I know you've talked about. But like gaslighting, from my understanding, is from an abuser perspective, you are deliberately gaslighting somebody because you are protecting yourself, or you're covering yourself, or you're trying to get something out of that. It's a deliberate act of deceit that's happening. And I think when people who are using street epistemology, I don't think that there's an act of deceit element, at least if they're good people, right? I think they're honestly trying to evaluate why someone believes what they believe. And wants to know, like, if the reasons that they believe something, is it reliable? Is it something you'd use for, is a method you use to believe one thing the same you'd use for other things? Again, it goes back to this idea that it's an examination. There's not a goal. Gaslighting, there's usually a goal, which is to, cover your tracks and make people doubt themselves for malicious intent. And I don't think SE qualifies in that sense. Oh, Jake, you still there?
Oh, yeah, I'm still there. I'm still here. Okay. I was just waiting for your co-host to.
Oh yeah, Autumn, I just wanted to know your take on gaslighting. Yeah.
Yeah, this is all new for me. So I'm used to, like, in normal conversation, you don't interrupt, whereas maybe on a talk show, you want to interrupt. I don't know yet. But so it's interesting to me that you brought up consent. First of all, my first thoughts were, when watching Anthony Magnabosco's Street Epistemology channel, he usually introduces the idea of street epistemology and says, this is what I'm doing, and says, is that okay with you? So I'm confused where there would be an inability to consent, especially when a lot of the people the students that he's talking to are adults. And so I feel like maybe I could see how street epistemology might make somebody so uncomfortable that they feel like because they were really uncomfortable with the outcome and the feelings that they had of doubt and not being able to explain something that just seems so true to their core and a belief maybe that they've held for a really long time. I could see how they could feel like, I don't want to feel this way. How can Anthony or somebody doing street epistemology change their style so that nobody has to feel the way that I feel? I feel like that I could understand when it comes to talking about consent, but then I think about how children cannot consent to being indoctrinated with beliefs, whether they be religious beliefs or maybe even political ideologies. I don't know. They can't consent to that. And in order to maybe come out of a belief that would be negatively affecting them, that could be not true, they would have to go through a process of deconstruction. I prefer the word deconstruction to like deconversion, or like that's when you're leaving a religion. I don't know what you'd call it when you're leaving a political view, but I guess that would be deconstruction. So they would have to go through a process of deconstruction in order to reconstruct to something else. And I think street epistemology, to me, when I've been learning street epistemology, my goal has been to try and create more critical thinkers. I think that instead of creating atheists, I'm not pro-atheism, I'm pro-critical thinking, right? So I want people to come to conclusions for better reasons than just my parents said so, you know? Sorry, there was a lot of thoughts all at once, but I was really thinking through what you guys were saying. Do you have a response for me?
Yeah, no, that's good thoughts. That's good. See that when we're talking about a child who's indoctrinated, if we're doing a manipulative or brainwashing technique, you don't fix two wrongs with the right, or you don't fix a wrong with another wrong. So if in fact it were manipulative, then it would be. But I like the deconstruction look on it, and what they're saying is Anthony does give the hey, this is what I'm doing. Is that okay with you? But they don't. They most of the time people had never heard of street epistemology, let alone epistemology, before the talk. And the way they put it was, I'm about to do a brainwashing technique or a manipulative conversation technique. Do you consent to being manipulated in this conversation? That's the way they analogize that type of consent. And like you were saying, when you have somebody who is in public, or semi in public, they're in a at least moderately, maybe semi high pressure situation. They don't want to look like the fool. Sure. So that does play into the power dynamic of the conversation.
And I can speak to that, Jake, as someone who was on the other side of the camera. Yeah, like there is kind of a thing where you don't want to feel like you mess up, and Anthony, I don't think he does these conversations live anymore, but he used to do those live. I think the one that I was talking with him was a live one. And so, yeah, I think he stopped doing that, but yeah, like that's definitely true. Like if you're going to add the camera into it, yeah, there might be something there where people don't feel like, they're saying the things that they want to say. I will add that, again, if somebody says to Anthony or anybody else, hey, I actually don't want this to go on YouTube or something, it doesn't go to YouTube, it doesn't go up there. And I just point out that if you look at the end of these videos, most people are smiling. Again, they really enjoyed this. But I would also say that you can still use this method off camera and have these same kinds of conversations. And, you take that element away. I mean, and there you go. It's still the same. I don't know if there's any questions that Anthony or any other street epistemologists are asking that I don't think any person shouldn't reasonably ask themselves when it comes to their beliefs.
I don't think the aspect of the camera or the live stream is the biggest issue that they have with SD. It's the power dynamic and the ability to consent and the typical online person you'd meet in like the SC Discord or other SC forums, that type of stuff. The typical goal that they seem to have of conversion to atheism.
Yeah, I don't know, Jay. I mean, like, but following that logic, one could say that this whole show, Truth Wanted, is violating people's consent in some way because it's on camera, and sometimes people don't have conversations that they don't expect to have.
Actually, this was directly addressed. Is the fact that it is a call-in show allows people to understand the dynamic. They can watch the show. They have the option to look up these terms before or even while on the call. So while there is still a imbalance of power in the conversation, it's at least the people have a much better informed consent when calling your show or other shows like it.
Yeah, that's true. But, again, I just had to point out that no conversation that anybody doesn't want to go on YouTube goes on YouTube when it comes to the street epistemology conversation. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I see that Anthony does that, and it's really cool that he does that. But this isn't the issue that they have. It's not about it necessarily being public. It's about the conversation technique being, even if it's not designed to be, it's used as, the manipulation that they've been telling me about.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I can only say that I hope that what I've said here makes sense, and that I've said what I've had to say about it. But as on a base level, I don't think street epistemology, the method itself, is a brainwashing method or anything like it. Are there malicious people who can use elements of it to their own gains? Yeah, I absolutely believe that. But I'm not convinced that the method itself, outside of even just the dynamics with the cameras and things like that, I'm not convinced of that. And hopefully I've stated my case clearly, Jake, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this call, because we got to get wrapping up on this show. But thanks for calling in, and I appreciate you giving your concerns. I appreciate having this conversation, because it's good to talk about this stuff. It is good to talk about the ethics of having conversations like this. And I wish you well, and I hope you have a good rest of your night. We got one more call here in the queue that I wanted to just bring up right before we get to the end of the show, because we got like 10 minutes. So I want to give him some time here. And it is the one, the only Shannon Q calling in to Truth Wanted. Shannon, what's going on?
Hi, how you doing? I'm good. I love you
good.
both. I'm calling in to fangirl about Autumn because I love her so much. You're all right too, Dan. You're okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
You're 95% okay.
That's higher than, yeah. Okay. I'll take it. Yeah.
That's higher than I generally give you. You're right.
Yeah.
So I have a couple options for you, essentially. So several things came up during the show. I've been listening start to finish that I thought were interesting, and I wanted to talk to you guys more about, because I'm incredibly selfish and I want to have dialogues with you guys about these things. So they're just like, so the first was the idea of the angry atheist, because I think that that's very interesting. And the second was the idea surrounding Jesus mythicism, because I think that that's an interesting concept. So I guess I'll let you guys pick which question.
Shannon, I think
spin the wheel.
I think the angry atheist thing is right up your alley. I think that's something you can speak to. So let's go with that.
Okay, I'm absolutely open to that, because I think it's a really interesting concept to delve into. So I said in the live chat earlier, for anybody who's watching from the start, that it's been in the live chat or is watching later, that I went through a phase that I wasn't necessarily angry, although I think some of my behaviors maybe manifested as angry, because I was frustrated with myself because I felt foolish. I felt as though I was an idiot. I had been fooled. I had been duped by something, and how could it be that I was so trivially foolish as to not investigate something that was so paramount to so many portions of my perspective on how I view the world and interact with people, as to just assume it. So I went through a phase where I behaviorally was, in retrospect, attempting to prove to myself that I wasn't a moron, that I was in fact smart. And that came off as kind of caustic. So I'm wondering if that resonates with either of you, or because I didn't hear Autumn necessarily talk about that, and I know how brilliant Autumn is. So I was wondering if you might have some input.
Yeah, Autumn, you go first, because I've been talking a lot.
My story's so weird, because I just wanted to feel happy at the point that I recognized my atheism, that I just didn't want to feel bad feelings. I've had moments where I felt angry, and I guess it more has been at the people who indoctrinated me, because I feel like this was not an angry atheist phase. These are like angry atheist moments, right? Excuse me, I'm having that demon voice thing again. Basically, I was more upset with the people who indoctrinated me, because I'm like, you should have known, and you should have maybe not been so strict in your structure of how you ran things in the house and how you talked about these things. There should have been more open-minded. I guess yeah, I guess I've been more upset with that than myself, but I think because I spent so much time beating myself up as a Christian, that by the time I learned that I didn't have to do that anymore, like, oh, I don't have to beat myself up, I can just say, like, you know what, I'm a human and I'm learning. That was so relieving to me that I guess that's like a sucky answer to you though, right? It's like I can't relate.
No.
Like I want to say that I relate to not wanting to feel vulnerable. Like I want to ideas that are to people, and I don't want to say something where I look like I don't know what I'm talking about, where I look vulnerable. And so I can relate to that sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to me, that's an informative answer, because I think there's a trope that all atheists kind of go through deconversion the same way, and it manifests the same way behaviorally. And that's why there is this trope about this sort of angry atheist phase. And even when I went through the phase, I don't see that I was necessarily angry. It's just in retrospect, I was hyper-vigilant in attempting to engage in these dialogues and prove what I knew now, because I felt foolish, but I wasn't angry. I wasn't attempting to, assert that I had a deference and intellect that needed to be recognized. It was more so that I wanted to prove to myself that I could demonstrate these arguments. And it sounds to me as though you're saying that this was, from a psychological perspective, kind of a relief to you, because you had gone through this indoctrination cycle where you'd already had these internal feelings that you should be ashamed of yourself, or that you weren't smart, or that you weren't getting things, or that your dissonance regarding the subject matter was somehow a reflection on your intellect. And it was a source of relief for you instead. So I think that the juxtaposition between our perspectives is actually an important message, because it shows that there is not just one type of deconversion, and that all of them are really important to talk about, because not everybody's going to relate to the deconversion story of somebody else and how they dealt with it. So I appreciate you sharing that, actually, and being honest.
Yeah, you're wonderful, Nan.
No, I'm not. You are. That's why I'm calling, because I love you so much. And Dan's okay.
Yeah. Again, I'll take it. It's fine.
Yeah,
but
Dan's better.
I'll finish by saying my piece about it, and then we'll have to wrap things up. But yeah, I think that it's relatable to me in the sense that, yeah, I did feel like I've been duped, but I think that anger really came from just realizing, oh, there's other people out there that are getting duped by this, because from my perspective, I wasn't even in it as deep as some other people. Like, yeah, I was in it. I mean, I guess it depends on who you talk to. I was in it pretty deep compared to some people, but like, I wasn't a young earth creationist. I wasn't somebody who dedicated 30 years of their life as a missionary. There's tons of these stories that you hear, and it's like, wow, like they did it based on, from my perspective, what would be false pretenses, because someone either consciously lied to them or unconsciously lied to them about something being true. Either way, it's still wrong in my eyes. And that's something that I want to fix. I want to talk about this. I want to see what other people think about this, because a part of my deconversion was learning a lot of information about Christianity, about the Bible, about science, about history, that I didn't have before. And I sincerely do believe that if people had that same information that I did, then they would change their minds too. But you got to know the right people to get that, because it's not like they're teaching that in schools or anything like that, which is, they don't, if they do talk about, religion and stuff, it's usually because they're breaking the United States law, at least at the public schools, or you're going to some private school that has its own curriculum, and who knows what it says in there. I can't tell you. I grew up in the public school system, but I've definitely heard stories about stuff being in textbooks that I don't think should be in textbooks. So I don't know. That's my take.
Yeah. That conversations like this are super valuable in my mind, because there's so many assertions and judgments of motivation that are levied at atheists, generally speaking, regarding their reasons for deconversion. And they're also front loaded with the assumption that all atheists deconverted. There are people who just were atheists also from the get-go. And there's so many different psychological, rational, and emotional motivations that go into the history that leads up to deconversion, or the history that made somebody, or not made somebody, but that means that somebody is an atheist. And the more people have these types of dialogues surrounding, what it means to them, how they got there, the less likely it is that when somebody hears one of those tropes, that it's going to resonate with them. And the more likely it is that they're going to have some sort of dissonance because they've seen a conversation like this and know that the three of us have very different stories and how we reacted to it is different. And that when somebody levies the reason you're an atheist is at them or other people, even as a theist looking at these types of dialogues, that it's a manipulation strategy that's being utilized to obfuscate the actual point of the issue and as kind of an ad hominem against the person in the conversation so that they can imbue motives upon them that undermine their ultimate point. So I appreciate you guys having the dialogue. Sorry I feel as though I just need to stop with trying to be on every ACA show, but the dialogues are so amazing. Such amazing guests, and I just am selfish.
Don't stop.
Yeah, don't stop, Shannon. You're always more than welcome to call back anytime.
No,
and of
we
course,
love
I
it.
appreciate you watching. We love you, Shannon. Thanks for calling tonight. Really appreciate you. And I hope to talk to you again soon. But for now, we're wrapping up this episode of Truth Wanted. But don't go away just yet, folks, because if you want to talk to me and my awesome guest, Autumn, we, pointing over here, we are about to go on to the ACA Discord. So come join us on there for our special after show. But in case you're going to miss it because you're not watching this live, Autumn, where can people find you at?
You can find me on my YouTube channel, Notes from Autumn, and then I have a handle there for Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I don't know what's going on with TikTok, but maybe you'll find me there. We'll find out. Microsoft, right? Are they buying TikTok?
I've heard different things about it.
No?
I don't know. It's probably all going to be shut down before the end of the year, because whatever. I don't know. TikTok's in a weird space, but yeah, that's where you can find Autumn. If you want to find me, I am Objectively Dan. You can follow me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. You can also find this show on places like YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts out. So be sure to subscribe, leave a review, do all of those things. Hey, I forgot to mention last week because I'm a jumbo dumbo, as I like to say, but we do have a Facebook group that you should definitely check out. It is the Truth Wanted fan group. And so we had another group. So if you were part of that last Facebook group, you should go and join this one because it's cool, guys. Community. Also, if you want to contact me, you can do it. It's truth@atheist-community.org. And if you want to support this show, there's a couple ways you can do it. I already mentioned patreon.com/truthwanted, but you can also become a YouTube member, get some cool emoticons, things like that. Really helps out. And we got some cool merch as well with Truth Wanted logos and stuff. Yay. It's really cool. Last but never not least, I have to thank the wonderful, awesome crew that helps make this show happen every single week. Thank you, crew. Look at all those crew members helping out on the show tonight. Autumn, I have to ask you, if you could be a chili pepper, what kind of chili pepper would you be?
Let's see here. Probably like those Ortega green chilies. Those ones are kind of mild. It's you get a little spice in there, but it's nothing too overwhelming. I'd like to think that I'm not too overwhelming. So
mild, but not too overwhelming.
Yeah,
mild, but not too overwhelming. That is the Notes from Autumn story. So, Autumn, thanks again for being on this episode of Truth Wanted. Thanks again, everybody, for watching this show. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?